Like if you have no time whatsoever and you just need a lighting setup that'll look really, really nice on you, and you have sun coming through a window, tape a white garbage bag to it, and it's instant magic.
This is the Cinematography for Actors podcast.
More than a podcast, Cinematography for Actors is a vibrant community devoted to bridging the gap between talent and crew. Each week, our show offers transparent, insightful conversations with industry leaders. We unveil the magic behind the scenes, from candid discussions about unique filmmaking processes to in-depth technical exploration. Join us in unraveling the intricacies of filmmaking, one episode at a time. It's more than just cameras and lenses. We aim to inspire, educate, and empower as we peel back the curtain on the art of effective storytelling. Now on to the episode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinematography for Actors podcast. We have a full room today with our three wonderful hosts, including myself. I count myself as wonderful. Yes, that's true. We have Brianna Wing, Haley Royal, and myself, Indiana Underhill, who is speaking. And then with us today is a very special guest. We only have special guests here, and that is Dain Fuentes. And Dane, we know through our relationship with Hot Rod Cameras and the wonderful event that we had a few months ago. Your team was such a huge support. And so I just want to do a bit of an intro that we have for you. So Dane is the Vice President of Technology at Hot Rod Cameras, a motion picture equipment store located in Burbank, California, serving the Hollywood industry and clients around the world. Between cinema camera sales and rentals, Dane has helped productions ranging from student films to blockbuster features. Prior to moving into sales, Dane worked as a freelance DP and crew member in camera lighting and grip departments. He has an MFA in cinematography from Chapman University, and Dane and the rest of his staff at Hot Rod, as we know from our experience, are the perfect place and people to help you with all of your equipment needs. So thank you, Dane, for coming in today.
Thank you.
I am really stoked about this because we have such a great existing relationship with CFA. You, as a collaborator and as someone who is at Hot Rod, you're so big on education, and a lot of the time you're educating clients who are coming in constantly. What has been, to start us off, like what is something someone's asking you a lot recently? People are coming in and want to know a lot about. What are people interested
in? What should I buy is a question we get a lot, and it comes from people in all walks of life. I would say that question typically is asked of us more frequently from people who are beginning or maybe switching over from a different part of the industry, or sometimes they're people who have worked on productions a lot but haven't owned equipment before, because there's a lot, like it's a pretty big can of worms in terms of what to buy and how to go about owning things and all that. So yes, that's a very broad question, but it probably is the one that we hear most often.
And what should I buy? Because it is, I think, always that conversation as a DP, and you're a DP yourself. It is a conversation of like, what do I need? Like, do I want to be the person that owns this gear because I want that rental, like that kit fee? Is it time for me to start to invest in that gear? Or is it like kind of bare minimum, what do I need? And for the actor perspective here, you know, for self-tapes, that's a question you guys are asking all the time.
And we don't even know what we don't know.
We have no idea what we need. Yeah. And so when people are coming in for what should I buy, what is like the formula around helping them design what that kit looks like to walk out the store with?
So Bree, like you said, it's the unknown, and that's what we try to tackle. I would say broadly, because what you find, so the good news for everybody first is that it's all good news when it comes to buying gear. There's a lot of great stuff out there. As you know, your phone can make a good image and record good audio. So kind of figuring out what information to pay attention to, what information is relevant to helping you achieve your goals. That's what we do. We're trying to empower people to make decisions, and so that usually starts with what is it that you want or need to do. Generally speaking, we try to figure out like what is it that it is, what are your goals? And if that's too broad of a question, then I might approach it from okay, what are the first 5 things you want to do when you have a camera? And if that's a little bit too vague because somebody doesn't have anything specific in mind, it might become a question of what are some projects you like, or are there some videos that you can show me? Especially if it's, I have a favorite YouTuber who does this type of thing, or self-tapes even, really anything. If we can't get to the heart of it by any other means than just actually looking at images that, I like that picture, I would like my footage to look like that, is one way to go about it. So we try to get as big picture as we can. I think actors in particular, I would think will have a lot of specific questions that maybe we can touch on today, but it's for us always about just figuring out, like, I keep saying what you want to do, and there's so many different ways to ask that question. Another way to ask that question is, if there were no inhibitions, you're not worried about anything, what is it that your heart actually wants to do? It goes back to everything being good news. There's just a million ways we can make things look great without spending $1. If we find the right information and do the right location scouting and talk about kind of what resources we have in terms of who are the people that we're friends with or even acquaintances with. And that's something I'd like to touch on. And just, other resources. What time do you have? Those sorts of things. What does the place you live look like? I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get really good looking projects, whether it's, skits, self-tapes, monologues. I mean, there's all kinds of great things. So we just try to help people find the answers to some of those types of questions as a starting point and then take it from there.
And nobody should feel nervous or embarrassed to walk in and be like, I don't know anything.
Help me. Yeah.
No, not at all. That really, if you think about it from a market perspective, you could buy everything that you can buy from us on Amazon. We all know that you could go to some other store around the street or online. So the only reason that you would come to a store is for people to help you, or because you need something that day. But if you're not in the situation of I have to have this, I have to pick it up today, then the question is, what can you do to help us figure this out? And so that is the entire purpose of visiting a store like ours. And then we also have things physically that you can try out in person, which is a perk, because typically it's, it can be a lot of money that people are spending. So getting your hands on things first can be really informative. But there's no need to be embarrassed. That question's great, because when you know that you don't know things, that opens up.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah. This is one thing from the very beginning that I've really loved about Hot Rod and the team at Hot Rod is the entire team is very dedicated to making sure that they're not just salespeople. They are individual. It's almost concierge service, but it's a concierge service to preserve the dignity of anyone walking in who may feel embarrassed, who may feel like they don't know what they're talking about. It's hand-holding, but without letting people know you're really holding their hand. You're saying, what do you need to do? What do you want to do? What can you spend? We can make it work. Like, we can figure out the thing that will work for you. And I think that is something that is so it's dying, it's rare, and it's really cool to see.
Because I know usually we're so quick to be like, let me just Google it real quick. It's like, you don't necessarily have to watch a 2-hour video unboxing or putting together online. You could also just call back up Hot Rod if you bought stuff from them, be like, how do I do this? And you guys would probably help them be like, you plug it in there. Okay, that took 5 minutes. And I got to talk to a
or what
human
adapter
being.
Do I need?
Yeah.
And is that going to do the job? Because it's a lot about, like, I remember when I bought my first camera when I was a photographer, I was like 17, it was a 5D Mark III. And I thought that was the be all end all. I was like, oh, I'm good. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, wait, I need multiple lenses now. Like you're like, a lot of people who probably haven't had this journey yet come in and are like, what camera is going to make everything look good? And it's like, well, that's not the answer.
It's a part of the piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, but I remember being in that position of like, okay, I spent all my money on this 5D Mark III. I'm good. That's why I bet I spent it all. And then I'm like, oh, well, the look I'm going to get is going to come from the lenses or the lighting or the environment around. And so there's just so many ways to weigh in on those decisions. And so it's great that you're all a resource there.
Thank you. Thank you for that description of us. That was very nice. I'll tell
Right.
everybody. And yes, that's a nightmare scenario for
Yes.
us. People spending their whole budget on
The
just
camera.
the camera.
Yeah.
Without, like, if somebody walked out the door not knowing everything that you just said, and then later they would contact us because, hey, like, nobody told me I needed these other things, that would be a problem for us. Not that they told us, but the fact that we did that, we would have a conversation internally, because that's just not, you know, the whole picture.
Totally.
Literally.
Yeah.
That you're trying to create.
Yeah.
So
Part
think
of your
it-
sales is education.
Yeah.
it's
And I think it is like a lot of people walking in thinking they only need that one thing and then they'll be famous or their stuff will look incredible. And it's weighing in all the options of like, oh, okay, you want to shoot like a voyeur perspective on life or like really raw. Okay, maybe you'll want this like ergonomic build with like these lenses on top of it that are maybe on the wider side, not something that's going to be more beauty that you saw in like your YouTube tutorials for the makeup stuff. Like it is really circumstantial to get into the technical so we can have our audience really walk away with like asking those questions and hopefully coming in to talk to you guys is let's talk from an actor perspective first, and then maybe we can shift into DP, director world, shooter content. Actor perspective, what are you recommending the most right now? Or what are the questions that you ask actors, or what should they be informed about when they walk into a store already? Or what questions should they have prepared? Things like that.
definitely number one is still, what do you want to do? And from my experience here in LA, most actors that I know doing self-tapes is a big part of it. I don't know the details of how many, but I do know that a lot of self-tapes want a head-to-toe shot. I know quite a few actors who have, that's a real problem with, you know, the living spaces that most of us are in Los Angeles. It's actually pretty hard to get a wide enough lens to get a head-to-toe shot on anything other than a phone. So if you want a camera that can do that, that's actually going to be a specialty wide lens most of the time.
If you're in like a studio apartment and you have to pull back to that
or
wall.
a single, right, sure. So we're going to recommend actually measuring the dimensions of your room. So we can try to, I don't want to have you buy a lens and then thinking it's wide enough, then you get home and your feet are cut off. That doesn't that doesn't help
It's
you.
not going to do that.
So
That's so nice of you.
knowing that well, you'll want to return it and then you'll be mad at us. So it benefits both of us. But so do you need a standing backdrop? Do you need a lighting kit for that? If you do, now we're talking about some budget being in play. And then I guess I would say the more actors can know about the tech specs of the self-tapes that they're doing. I don't know if they're all the same, but I do know that
There are some common things you generally always have to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. If I mean, it would be rare that we couldn't come up with lights on a budget for that purpose, because there are some pretty low budget lights. But I would say if you're an actor and that's your, I guess, knowing what your main if you're prioritizing self-tapes over something like sketches, skits, shorts, then we would try to figure out a way to get you that full lighting setup and backdrop,
Right.
so that you're not missing out on your primary thing. You know, low light is typically an obstacle that most people face when shooting indoors.
Yeah.
So I would either want to recommend lenses or lighting that facilitate, lenses or cameras that facilitate low light shoots. And I think that's probably going to be the case for most people who want to do narrative shooting, unless they only ever plan to shoot outside, which in that case, awesome.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be a matter probably more of learning about how to work with natural light and what resources are available for that, which there are really, really good resources available for that, namely sun tracking software. Which, have you ever heard of that?
No.
Or, Haley, are you familiar with that?
I'm sure Indiana is.
I sure am.
Yeah. So just to so as an actor, like if you wanted to shoot something, let's just say that you have learned that you really like how things appear in the shade. So what we call open shade in lighting is, like, say you're on the side of a building and that part of the building is in the shade for like the majority of a day. That's open shade.
Okay.
Open shade is probably the most flattering natural light that you come by at least in LA where you don't have a lot of cloudy weather.
Right.
So then the question would be, how do I shoot it in this open shade? The way to do that would be to schedule. Well, how do you schedule? How do you know when that area is going to be in the shade? That's when you start to look at sun tracking software.
Right.
So there's free versions, there's paid versions, but ultimately there's software out there that if you put in your GPS coordinates or your address on the map, or you just zoom in on the map, you can actually put in the day and the time, and it'll show you where the sun's going to be in relation to that location. So you can figure out, okay, from 2 to 4 is my window where I'm going to have this open shade. That means I have to be ready to go at 2 and ready to finish at 4.
Seems like that could also be helpful if we're jumping back to self-tapes. An actor who prefers to shoot a self-tape in natural light, and they have a small window on the south side, they can check when's going to be the best time to be shooting that self-tape instead of just guessing and then sending in something that's dark or not lit the way they want it to be. Something like that could be helpful. And it also sounds like an actor walking in to Hot Rod to buy a setup that they need for self-tapes, it's going to be the best idea to understand your limitations, understand what kind of space you're living in. And I know that personally, in the past, I've been very shy about the type of home I can afford to live in. That's unfortunately a source of embarrassment for me from time to time. So walking into a store and saying, I'm ready to put down some money here, and then having to say, oh, but I really have very little. This is the room I have to shoot in. That's something that you can feel safe doing at Hot Rod, because it's literally, I want to use the word schematics because it sounds cool, but I don't think that's a real thing. It's just, you have to know what you're up against, because you can make a tape look really good with very little. And the team at Hot Rod can help you do that, but you have to come prepared to say, oh no, I live in a 10 by 10 box.
And you don't need to
and
be
I don't have
embarrassed
any
or ashamed.
windows.
It can be intimidating to walk into like any camera place or expendable store as an actor, that if you don't have experience working on the crew side of things.
I've helped both of them with self-tapes at this point and in different areas of their life. And so it's really interesting because from a DP perspective, and as a DP, you understand it's like, we know a certain way of lighting and, we know we change it for the story. But for a lot of actors, you're just stoked if you have lighting. You're like, I don't know if I can change this for a commercial, a drama, a scary movie. Like, you probably have like ideas of it, but it's probably just getting the basis and the foundation and then using those tools to be versatile eventually as you gain the confidence to be like, oh, this is an audition for like a scary movie. Do I want to add a little more contrast? Like, do I want, it's a commercial shoot and I need to look younger than I actually am. Do I want to like prioritize natural light? If so, then maybe I'll bring in a bounce. So it's the education around like, what is my starting package I need, and how our vendors and collaborators going to educate me on that. But then also, what are maybe the like add-ons I could keep to the side for when I'm ready to bring that in? And so, Dane, I'd love to know what you think about what those add-ons could be. So like, say someone comes in and they're like, I have a 3-point lighting setup. I shoot on my iPhone. I'm pretty excited about it. My audio sounds good, but I'm ready to take my self-tape setup to the next level. What would you recommend? I was thinking more on the lines of like bounces and reflectors, or how to black out windows and things, but I'd love to know if you have any extra bits that might be fun.
Yeah, so the next level being more of like the narrative looks that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's like it's like not going from just self-tape world, but maybe we're doing self-tapes, but you're trying to get into commercial now, and so you're trying to make it have more of that glam look, or you're trying to do more thriller or like, drama.
Also, something that's been really fun for me to think about is every self-tape is a tiny production. And why do we have to always just shoot everything in front of a gray background and have 3-point lighting? If you are up for it, and if you feel like it would be fun for you, being able to shoot it like a short film and then send in, auditions are work, that's a lot of time, but if you're having a good time doing it, you can use that to learn other things and be able to eventually shoot other things. If someone's like, I have a dramatic audition, how should I light this?
How do I get eye light in?
Yeah, how should I have a little interesting camera angle?
Yeah.
What sort of things would you suggest?
Good questions. I'm glad you brought them up. So I used to do that pretty regularly with an actor friend.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, and so usually the equipment list didn't necessarily get larger. Although we did add grip gear, so flags and things to block off light, black wrap, which would for most people not be part of the initial package
Right.
necessarily. So that would definitely be a huge part of it. A flag, for people who don't know, is it's usually a rectangular device that is a frame with black cloth on it, and it's used to cut light out so that you have light falling only where you want it to fall and to cast shadows. So we would use some grip gear. Often with lighting, at least from my perspective, I feel like the very, 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 very most important property of light is the direction it's coming from.
Okay, we are stoked to shout out our audio sponsor, Dain Microphones. Their S-Mic 2 Pro shotgun mics have impeccable sound clarity, directionality, headphone monitoring, and a user-friendly design. And we're proud to launch our studio with them. Our goal is to bring you educational gems every episode, and with these mics, you can listen to the best quality audio possible wherever you are. To learn more about using Deity mics for your own podcasting, voiceover, or filming needs, go to deitymic.com.
So noir films are suspenseful, and often there's sort of scary things, and there are villains, and there's good and evil, and all of that is communicated through shadows and light. And so that is all done by controlling the direction that the light is coming from. So, or primarily, it is not controlled through the softness or hardness of the light in those films traditionally, and in a lot of older films, because they didn't have enough light present to make the light soft and gentle, but you still communicate the feeling that you want by having a light directly from your side or directly behind you versus having a light directly in front of you. And when you talk about different genres, you'll often find that sort of the conventions in the genre, visually speaking, are often visually determined by the direction of the light. So if you think of a 4-camera sitcom on television, it's typically a very flat look because everything is lit from every direction because there are multiple cameras shooting, and so you have that even light, and that's very consistent from 4-cam sitcom to 4-cam sitcom throughout history. It's really never changed. If you look at horror films, you'll find a lot of sources of light behind people and a lot of shadows everywhere and minimal usage of light. So getting a hang of those things would be one step towards what you're talking about. Adding things like flags, stands to hold reflectors, adding reflectors, diffusion. One way to diffuse natural light, to use natural light is by diffusing it, and so knowing where your biggest and brightest windows in your living space are and at what time of day, if any, does the sun come through them. Because if the sun comes through them for a part of the day, then what that ultimately means is you can't be consistent for a full day while shooting in that room, which means you either need to have a way to address that by adding diffusion when the sun is coming through them and removing it when it's not, or you plan to shoot around it so that you're shooting either all in direct sunlight or non-indirect sunlight. Diffusion materials you could use at home to make your windows look nice would include white sheets, or what I've used a lot of times in apartments is white garbage bags cut in half.
Yeah.
They make a nice rectangle that you can just tape onto a window.
That's a great idea.
And
Great.
it will give you a very beautiful soft light. Like if you have no time whatsoever and you just need a lighting setup that'll look really, really nice on you, and you have sun coming through a window, tape a white garbage bag to it, and it's instant magic.
Shower curtains, sheets,
Amazing.
white garbage bags, all the things that you
linen
can find. A nice
Yes.
linen shirt, even.
Yeah.
And the thicker the fabric, the more it will diffuse, but also the more light you will lose.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that is the trade-off. So for all of those things, though, I would recommend. If you love learning on YouTube like I do, that's one great source. But another thing that's going to help you out a lot is working with people, and your friends and acquaintances and other people you've met on set. And if you're in Los Angeles, honestly, I would recommend considering being transactional about how you work with people. I think it's not first nature to a lot of us, and it can really hurt us. And so what I mean by that is, let's just say you wanted to do some of the types of self-tapes like you're talking about that have a narrative look to them. Absolutely, you can feel empowered to learn about it on your own and try to do it yourself. And that's really great and wonderful, and I would encourage it 1,000%. But it can also help to have like a trained DP or a camera operator or someone who works in lighting. And then of course you run into well, I don't have any money. And so then I guess the question would be like, what do you have that you can offer to this person? It's okay to have a transactional relationship with one person or more. And so in that case, maybe, if you can help me out with this, I will help you on this shoot. Or
even if it's an extra set of hands or being a PA, everybody always needs help carrying gear.
Yeah.
Or film school DPs who are looking for stuff for their reel.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you can make it look narrative enough, then they can use it on their reel.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, a lot of people just want content, and DPs included, to sell themselves on social media. So, I mean, even if you are just shooting a self-tape, you can post about, I mean, it's just, I think
you can have this footage. If this looks great and you help me shoot it, take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So in all of those scenarios, though, it is about speaking to people, and people that you meet on set are a great place to start because you've met them already. And whatever you can offer in return doesn't have to be something on set either. I mean, I'm just trying to be resourceful, knowing that I have a certain amount of time per week available, and that's all I have right now. Maybe I don't have money that I'm looking to spend, but whatever, I've got my time so I can be of use. I'm just, the point being, everyone that we know, those are our resources and our energy and our time and our money. I wanted to comment on something you said.
Okay.
Because I think this is really important, super important, in my opinion. You mentioned the idea of just doing a self-tape, like with a 3-point lighting setup. And what I wanted to touch on is I don't believe in just doing anything at all, period. And I think when we feel like we're just doing something, or we say that to somebody, like, can you help me out? I'm just doing an audition tape. That's minimizing the thing that you're doing. And I think as a creator,
I love that.
Like, we
Dane.
don't want to do that, right? And I think, partially because it can have psychological effects on us that aren't helpful. Maybe it's not hurtful because it's just how we think, but the person you're talking to, unless they're one of your best friends or something, if you're just doing something, there's not a lot of incentive for them to get on board. Necessarily.
Show up on time, give their full attention, turn their phone off while you're trying to do it.
Yeah, to them it might sound like it's not a big deal.
Yeah, they don't care about it.
Right, and I understand with self-tapes, people do them so often that it does feel like a routine thing, and it can be a routine thing. But when setting it up, when finding your setup, when finding people to help you or people to work with, I think the more that we can communicate that what we're trying to do is something really great, the better off we're going to be, the better the collaboration is going to be. Maybe the result will be better. And when I think about, like, I know we've talked about monologues because of the event we did was all monologues. And my feeling on monologues, I mean, the Sophie's Choice scene is a monologue. That's just one camera and one actor and a script. And literally there's not anything preventing, like, Meryl Streep's great, but she doesn't have magical powers that make her better than everybody else. She's just really good at doing her job, and I'm sure she puts a lot of work in, but there's nothing stopping you from as an actor from at least trying to do the best self-tape anybody's ever done, or the best monologue anybody's ever done. And I think that's a helpful mindset, and knowing, I mean, I think it goes into like purchasing decisions too, because at least I would want you to keep in mind that, like, I'm not trying to sell you just some lights so you can just do some little projects. You know what I mean?
That's a great
I'm trying
point.
to sell you whatever's going to facilitate making the best project.
Yes.
And we could find a ton of projects online that are like, I know someone who got a meeting and got representation based on a 2-person sketch she did, which was I think it was called "What People Who Are Going to Coachella Say," or something like that. It was like probably about 8 years ago, and when people were doing those videos and they were really popular, like shit that whoever says. So she and her friend did this video and got a meeting and got signed, and a bunch of people were like, oh, that's so weird they got signed for that, because it's like rah, rah, rah. But she had been doing similar things for quite a while, either with that theme, or she had one really, really funny one that's a monologue of her ordering coffee and being very inappropriate, and it's great, you know. And it's just a camera, it's her and a location, but there's just nothing stopping the thing that you're making from being great, unless you've decided that it can't be great. And we will never decide that there's no tool that can help you make it great. And you know, I think if you're collaborating with good collaborators who believe in what you're trying to do, and you believe in what you're trying to do, then, you know, the tools that you need and techniques, I mean, those are important parts of it, but I do feel like it needs to start with that acceptance that, like, okay, we have the things in front of us to make something great now, so let's go do it.
I'm so glad that you brought this up, because this mindset it's important for not only, you know, the immediacy of whatever you're creating and understanding that you're doing it so clearly it matters, but the longevity of a career, really, and the longevity of a career as an actor, which can be unforgiving, and it can be a low feedback type of situation. You can get burnt out really easily. Finding a way, you know, self-tapes can have the potential to be overwhelming, or come at the wrong time, or feel like busy work or tedious homework. And so I think you're absolutely right. It is important to find a way, whichever it is, to make those seem like something, or to make those become something that you truly enjoy doing, whether it is shooting them as though they are the most important film you've ever made, or, you know, believing that they are important because it's something you're doing. But doing that is going to help it feel like less and less like unpaid work, and more like something you create because you love doing it.
Yeah.
And each time is an opportunity to learn and try something new. Okay, let me see what happens when I put this white foam board down on the ground. What does that do to my eyes and the light that comes from them? And how does that change? And I love that. It's never just an audition. Each one is also an opportunity to try something new and learn. And you don't have to be perfect at something to dive right in and just try. Sometimes just doing something is better than not doing it because you feel you need to do it perfectly, because that's the fastest way you're going to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's talk about how people can afford to buy gear.
Yeah.
It can get expensive, because if you're starting from ground zero, you do need like a few things to get going, regardless of kind of like what you're working as. Let's talk about how people justify the costs or even make profit off of gear. What are some of the tools that people can use, or resources that exist for that?
So financing can be an obstacle for sure. When you're getting started, I would say it's really important to find out what you need. And what I mean by it this time is, like, very specifically, these are the pieces of equipment that will be used in the making of this type of project. This piece of equipment will not be used in the making of this type of project.
We have some exciting news. CFA has teamed up with We Make Movies to get you a discount on production management services, including access to comprehensive production insurance and workers' comp for your next shoot. Visit wemakemovies.org/insurance and use code CFA23 on your intake form for 10% off your quote.
So, for example, if you wanted to do real estate photos, you need an ultra wide lens. That's just, it has to happen. You do not need a long telephoto lens. So if you go by like a Canon 70-200, which are the lenses everybody sees at sporting events and weddings and things like that, that lens is not going to serve you. That's $2,500 down the drain for your immediate purposes. So number one, let's find out what specifically needs to happen. Like, you're going to get out of bed and shoot something today. what needs to come out of your bag, because that's all that we want to put into your bag. In terms of affording it, the other part of figuring out what you need to do is what is the role that making images is going to play in your life? Are you going to do it professionally? Are you doing it as a hobby? Are you doing it as an aspiring professional? If you're doing it as an aspiring professional, then finding out what are the deal breaker technical limitations or technical standards that I have to meet. And that's an important one, because if you don't meet them, you're not eligible to do whatever it is you want to do. So like one example would be, let's just say you're an actor and you want to get into photography and you really like the idea of selling photos as stock photography because that's a nice way to make some money. Stock agencies have specific requirements in terms of resolution, in terms of file type, in terms of, they don't have necessarily ISO settings, but they might. And the people who sell photos there will often tell you there are message boards for that sort of thing, that even though it's not hard technical requirement, they're not accepting videos or photos that are shot at high ISO values.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's more about like less around, you need like first the pinnacle of like what is the technical limitation and then what is like the probably necessary requirements around the technical that are not being told to you, but you need to have enough of a skill set to understand.
Yes. And that's what people like us can help you figure out. Great. But it's also what message boards are good for, specifically when it relates to deliverables. So if you have professional aspirations, then the idea of deliverables needs to be front of mind. What do I have to hand my client?
Yes.
And that's going to vary from industry to industry. So that's going to take probably some personal research. Once you've gotten all that figured out, let's say you figured out like, okay, this is the camera for me. This is the lens for me. How do I afford it? I guess before we get to the final camera, I would say out of the ones that meet the necessary specifications, let's just say there are a few different brands that offer that camera, a camera that meets those specs. Then how do I figure out which brand I want? A lot of times budget can do that. If you're trying to work professionally or if that's your goal, then that's really not the case. In the professional world, a lot of times, especially in LA, productions do have very specific cameras or camera brands that they want you to have. Producers have that. Red and Arri are the two. Ari's really the biggest one. Sony is one of them. Red is one of them. But so many times when you're looking at listings, it'll say, shooting a music video, must have Red camera. If you don't have that, you're not getting the job. That's just all there is to it. So then you either need to look at renting it or, figuring out a way to buy it. But if that's not the situation you're in, where you have these deliverable type things, if you're not aspiring to be a professional now, you want, say, a camera to make your own stuff with or learn with, you're free from all of that. So any camera by any brand that actually meets your requirements is now an option. So I would start to look at some of the lower price models. A lot of times with expensive cameras, you're paying for a million different features, but you might not be using most of those features, especially if you're shooting video primarily. If you're shooting video primarily, a lot of the high-end still camera specs are not going to serve you, period. You're not going to use them ever. So there's really no need to pay for them. So I would start to look at lower models that aren't the flagship model as a way of saving money. Brands that weren't necessarily on your radar that could do the job. The used market, if you've just got to have that flagship camera for some reason and the only way you can get it is at a used price, then that's that. Yeah. Another option would be to see, is there any case to be made for renting that piece of equipment on a reoccurring basis? Lenses, for example, still camera lenses tend to be very cheap to rent. You can usually get them for under $100 for like 3 days. So if you have one and only one shoot that requires a certain type of lens, but it's not going to be part of what you're normally doing, then maybe renting it makes sense.
And also, I think let's talk about the reverse of that, where maybe you're buying something that's more expensive because you want to make a profit on it when you're not using it. Okay. And so what is that mentality around, what is the minimum entry level to begin to make a profit off the gear that you're investing in? And what are the resources? So I know a lot of people probably listening don't know what share good is or rental consignment and how that works. And so for actors, how can they justify that cost?
Yeah, all great questions. So just to wrap up the financing part, I'll just add that Black Friday is great. Cyber Monday is great. Most major manufacturers do big sales once or twice a year. So if you've identified a certain piece of equipment that has to be the one that you have to have, but you just can't justify the cost of it, get in touch with people like us. We'll know if that brand does Black Friday. We might not know the prices in advance, but like I can tell you, that Canon does Black Friday, and that's going to be the best time to save money on a Canon camera.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to do it. Some people finance equipment. We work with a financing. Well, like on our website, for example, you can do PayPal credit or Affirm. I haven't used either of those. We also have a financing company that you can speak with if your order would be over $3,000 but under 10, and then a different company for items between $10,000 and up. In addition to that, most of the manufacturers will, I don't know if it's fair to say most, but for more expensive equipment, camera companies like Sony and Red and Ari, and also lighting companies and lens companies, they will occasionally do financing deals where for a brief period of time you can buy this camera with 24 months, $0, zero interest.
Yeah.
Usually to qualify for that, you have to have really excellent credit, and there's a whole bunch of other parameters that go into it, but it is a thing that exists.
Yeah.
And it's worth looking into.
Yeah.
And so I'll touch on the other side of it, the rental side that you were talking about, because this is what a lot of people do. And so when if you're an actor and you're wondering how these camera guys own so much stuff,
the secret is they don't own it.
The secret often is that, and even rental houses don't always own it. So a lot of people in LA, I would say, I don't know about the majority of our customers, but probably the majority of our customers that own fancy equipment, meaning anything like $10,000 and above, people typically rent it out as well. And so if they're an owner operator, the business model is like, you would hire me, you would pay me for my services, and then you would also pay me for the rental of my equipment on this shoot. And when I am not shooting, I might have my equipment living at a camera or lighting rental house, and they rent it out, and they get a cut, and I get a cut. And so that's called gear consignment. That is a super common thing when you're on set on any kind of project. The odds that the rental house doesn't actually own the camera, it's a consigned camera, are really, really decent. It's most people who are buying $50,000 or $100,000 cameras are letting them live in a rental house, and so anytime they're not using it, it can hopefully be making money for them by being rented out.
Right.
So that's one route. That is often reserved for, I guess what I would call industry standard motion picture gear. So like some of it can be budget, but it's typically got to be budget stuff by brands that are well known.
Yeah.
And it's usually not budget stuff. It's usually more like your high-end monitors, high-end cameras, high-end lenses, all that sort of thing. If that's a route that you would like to pursue, you can get in touch with me at the store. I'll leave, I'm sure my contact info will be available.
It will.
But in a nutshell, I would say if you want to approach that, what that's going to consist of is ideally talking to a few different rental houses. Everybody does it differently. There's sort of an industry standard split, as they call it, as in the percentage of profit that the owner versus the rental house gets. It's actually in favor of the owner. They get the majority of the money that comes in. But you can negotiate that. One way to generate more money, if you do have something on consignment, would be to be willing to give them more of a percentage on it.
Yeah.
On a job-to-job basis. Because if everybody else gives them a certain percentage and you give them a certain, like a little bit more,
they'll push yours.
Yeah, they'll push yours because there's, or at least they might be willing to. It's a conversation that's worth having, and I would say if you've got cinematographer friends or camera operator owner or owner operator friends that own this kind of gear, talk to them about it if you're interested, because they'll have the hands-on experience working with one or more places and can tell you sort of the ins and outs, and here's what's great about it, here are kind of the pitfalls of it.
Yeah. And it's not just cameras, it's batteries, it's monitors, it's wireless accessories.
Yeah.
So it's like, It could be, the new side hustle for actors to get into. But I think it might be a little overwhelming. But
if you want.
But the other side
Bruce
of that,
Willis does it though.
yeah, cool, great.
Yeah.
We're
He
all
and his brother have a company together, and they own camera gear, and it lives at a rental house.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure there are more well-known actors that
Definitely.
probably do that.
And then I think also the other side of that for things that are under $10,000 or even over is ShareGrid or services online where, as an actor, if you don't have a self-tape that day or like you're going away on vacation, you can list it as available, and so you're not having to keep it and house it at a rental house. You can still use it for your self-tapes, but then actually make money on it possibly by listing it, which is
a great resource.
ShareGrid can be really, really great for a couple reasons. So it is peer-to-peer, meaning it's totally on your time. If you want to list something you own, you list it. If you don't, you take it down.
Yeah.
Unlike traditional rental houses, a lot of very low-cost equipment is listed on ShareGrid. So if you buy, say, an audio recorder by the brand Zoom, these are typically low cost, like in the neighborhood of a few $100s. There's actually a rental market for that. It might only be $35 a day or something like that. But I mean, how many times does that have to go out to pay for a $300 item?
And you might wonder, well, why would I rent something for only $35 a day when I could buy it for $200? Maybe you don't know what size. For example, if you're in the market for getting a 4 to 8 terabyte drive, but you don't really know what would be more appropriate for a project you're doing, it's a great way to try different things before you decide on
Take the
one.
full leap for investing. Yeah.
Also, if you don't have the space to store stuff, you don't want to be holding on to it all the time.
Yeah, totally.
So what would you say, because we have to wrap things up, unfortunately, what would you say is like, I heard come in with dimensions for the room for self-tape. What are some of the other like answers they should already have, whether it be an actor or a DP coming in? Anything that they need to bring? Is there any pieces of equipment people are overlooking? And what kind of research should they be doing or doing with you when they walk into the store?
Yeah, so in advance, I would say the more of a clear idea of what it is that I don't want to say what you want to achieve like in the long run necessarily, although that's part of it, but what you want to create in the short term would be great. If you can think as far ahead as like maybe a year or 10 to 15 projects, then I think you're going to be in a really good position to find some gear that's really going to serve you. I think having a pretty realistic idea of the budget that you can afford is going to be a good idea. Also knowing that you're potentially at the beginning of a journey and there are going to be directions that you go in that are not necessarily what you foresee. So, if you have $5,000, don't have it in your mind that you're going to buy a $5,000 camera body, right. Because you're going to need batteries, you're going to need media, you're going to need a case, you're going to need many, many different things. So, if your budget is $5, I might not spend the full $5 up front, right. Knowing that maybe you get home, you play around, you realize the batteries only last an hour or two. I don't want that. I need more batteries, or I need a battery grip, or, some things like that, knowing that there are going to be curves and bumps in the road, and that, like anything, to become proficient in something and prolific at it, it is a journey, and I think just keeping that in mind is going to put you in a good mindset to, move forward. Otherwise, any kind of images that you can have, especially if you don't have a technical vocabulary or experience, because I know it can be frustrating. I've seen it be frustrating for people who are trying to explain, like, I want my pictures to look better, but I don't know what about, I don't have the vocabulary to express what about them I would like to look better, because then whoever you're talking to is just guessing, and we try our best, but we can guess incorrectly.
Yes.
So if you can go as far as, like, don't be embarrassed or ashamed, but actually bring in a screenshot of something that is ugly to you, or something that isn't making you happy in your own work. If you have done work that you're unhappy with, or if you have a camera and you think you need a new one, that's a great way to go, because then that gives us something tangible that we can say, okay, I can see these few things about it that if they were different, you might be happy with that image. So
Bring your problems.
yeah,
Bring your problems,
that's a
and
really
Hot Rod
great
will
way.
solve
Be
them.
vulnerable with Hot Rod, everyone.
Be vulnerable and
I love that so much.
that's funny.
Dane, thank you so much for coming in. If people want to get in touch with you or the Hot Rod team, what is the easiest way for that to happen?
So we have a website. It's www.hotrodcameras.com. We do have web chat there, so you're welcome to do that. However, we answer the phone. Our number is 323-230-3589. And you can email us at email@hotrodcameras.com. That's cameras plural. If you want to get in touch with me, we only have one phone number, but you can email me personally. My first name is spelled Dain. It's Dane at hotrodcameras.com.
Awesome.
And we look forward to talking to everybody.
I'm excited for people to be able to come in with all of their questions and help problem solve on the creative, technical, and practical. So this has been great. We love Hot Rod. We will advocate for them every day, all day. So please head on out and start your gear journey.
Join us in bridging the gap between talent and crew. Start by subscribing on your preferred podcast platform, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on vendor discounts, community events, and new podcast releases, and educate yourself through our free course releases on YouTube. It all starts at cinematographyforactors.com. And if you like this episode, consider leaving a review to make it easier for other listeners to find us.